she didn't abdicate. She didn't resign. She was thrown out. July 28, 2025, Queen Camilla was dragged from the palace in silence, sentenced for the unthinkable, her role in the death of Princess Diana. A hidden recording. A royal pact. A betrayal buried for decades. This wasn't just the fall of a queen, it was the day the monarchy cracked from within. And Diana's revenge? Had only just begun. The charge wasn't symbolic. It was catastrophic. Camilla had been found complicit in the death of Princess Diana. 28 years of silence, shattered by a single ruling. If you believe the truth should never stay buried, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this story. Because the crown's darkest secrets are no longer secrets, and what comes next will shake the royal family to its core. Hours earlier, the tribunal had delivered the verdict that shattered what remained of the crown's dignity: guilty. Not of mistake. Not of misstep. But of complicity. Complicity in the death of Princess Diana. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't redacted. It was spoken clearly, publicly, and finally. The crowd outside Westminster exploded. Cheers turned into chants. Tears turned into roars. The world hadn't seen justice, it had witnessed royal demolition. For nearly 3 decades, Camilla had walked the palace halls beneath chandeliers lit with lies. But now, the walls were closing in, and the whispers that once trailed her footsteps had turned into thunder. They called it exile. But what really happened was this: Camilla was erased. Her punishment wasn't symbolic, it was absolute. She was removed from royal duties, banned from attending any event tied to the monarchy, and sent to a remote, classified estate in the Scottish Highlands. Her exile was swift. Clinical. Surgical. She had 2 hours to leave. No public statement. No royal farewell. Only silence and the weight of a verdict that echoed louder than any royal trumpet ever had. Inside the palace, no one fought for her. Not even Charles. Because he knew. He had known for years. The tapes had surfaced 2 weeks earlier. One of them timestamped August 29, 1997. Just 48 hours before Diana's fatal crash in Paris. The voice was calm. Cold. Calculated. "Are you sure the escort can wait?" Camilla had asked. That escort was never deployed. Diana's vehicle left without protection. And never returned. The investigation, quietly launched under the name Operation Orchid by Prince William, had uncovered everything. Security logs, bank transfers, encrypted emails between Camilla's aides and unknown operatives. But it wasn't the evidence that made the world freeze. It was the intent. Camilla hadn't just known. She had orchestrated. And now, she would pay. The Isle of Skye had been chosen not for its beauty, but for its isolation. The estate, once used to house wartime spies, was surrounded by cliffs and silence. No roads in. No press out. Camilla was delivered there under armed watch. 6 government-assigned personnel monitored her every move. 2 guards. 1 nurse. A cook. A steward. And a legal observer. Her world was reduced to a routine. 6:30 a.m. wake-ups. Therapy at 10. Dinner at 6. Lights out by 9. No television. No internet. No calls except 1 monitored phone call per week to her sister, Annabelle. Even her letters were censored. She wasn't just exiled. She was contained. And outside her walls, her name was burning. The Parker Bowles family went dark. Laura was forced to resign from her trusteeship at the National Gallery. Tom pulled out of public life after losing his column amid death threats. Camilla's name had become synonymous with betrayal. And yet, the worst was still to come. Because while the nation celebrated, Prince William went deeper. Operation Orchid wasn't over. It had only opened the first door. What lay behind it was something darker than betrayal. Something ancient. Something systemic. On August 4, the royal archives were breached, not by hackers, but by warrant. William had demanded access to Protocol 97, a sealed document buried beneath layers of monarchy classification. Inside was a pact. Signed 2 weeks after Diana's funeral, the document revealed a covert agreement between Charles, Camilla, and the palace's senior legal advisor, Sir Aldrich Hawthorne. It stated, in chilling terms, any actions by the consort deemed destabilizing to institutional continuity shall be suppressed or obfuscated, with prejudice, for the protection of the sovereign and the crown. In other words, if Camilla became a threat, the monarchy would cover it up. Included were handwritten notes. Some from Charles's private secretary. One referenced foreign intermediaries and summer transactions linked to Paris logistics. The implications were nuclear. Charles hadn't just known. He'd agreed to bury it. When confronted by the Royal Advisory Council, Charles looked like a man drowning. His voice barely above a whisper, he said only, "I loved her enough to protect her. Even when I feared the truth." By dawn, that quote had gone viral. It was printed across front pages from New York to Nairobi. Millions shared it. Millions raged. And the streets outside Buckingham Palace lit up again. This time, not with torches, but with reckoning. Crowds held signs that read, "Not just her and who else knew?" The monarchy had detonated a bomb in its own basement. And now, everyone was choking on the smoke. Through it all, one figure remained still. Catherine. She said nothing. She didn't need to. On August 18, she entered the royal vault beneath Kensington Palace. With her were royal archivists, security officers, and a single white envelope. Inside the envelope was a letter. Its seal bore the emblem of Diana. The inscription read, "To Charlotte, from your grandmother, through me." No press release followed. No cameras allowed. But within hours, the story leaked. Catherine had legally transferred Diana's personal artifacts, letters, diaries, heirlooms, into permanent custody of the Wales bloodline. Not the crown. It was more than a gesture. It was a war cry. Catherine wasn't protecting history. She was reclaiming it. And the people felt it. For the first time in years, they weren't watching a monarchy in decline. They were watching a legacy reborn. The moment she was taken, the palace gates didn't close, they slammed. Camilla's screams weren't heard. If she begged, it stayed locked inside the bulletproof vehicle that carried her away. The only sound outside was the thundering crowd, chanting one name, Diana. Inside Buckingham Palace, her portrait was removed before sunset. Staff who once curtsied now turned their backs. Even the corgis were kept from the East Wing, where she had lived for years. She had been erased like a smudge on royal marble, and it was just beginning. Her exile wasn't a quiet departure. It was a sentence, cold and absolute. She was driven north for 16 hours under tight surveillance to a remote estate on the Isle of Skye. The land there was cold and brutal. Fitting. Her new home was not regal, it was a prison dressed in stone. No royal linen. No private chef. No marble floors. No escape. The gates were sealed behind her, and the guards didn't speak. She had become the monarchy's darkest secret, locked away, buried alive. Only 6 people were assigned to the estate. Not one of them bowed. Her routine was mechanical: wake, eat, be watched, repeat. She could read, but only from a list of pre-approved books. She could write, but every letter was scanned, copied, and archived. She was allowed one supervised phone call a week to her sister, Annabel. No calls to Charles. No contact with her children. She asked for television. Denied. She asked for news. Given only a censored digest. She asked to speak to Tom and Laura. They didn't answer. The world was no longer protecting her, it was hunting what else she had buried. And the hunters were already inside the palace. Prince William never spoke to the press. He didn't have to. His silence had become its own language, sharp, cold, final. After Camilla's sentencing, he returned to Kensington Palace and re-entered the Royal Intelligence Archives, accessing files sealed even from the Prime Minister. He wasn't searching for confirmation. He was searching for accomplices. And he found them. In a locked vault labeled Protocol 97, William discovered a pact, a written agreement between Charles, Camilla, and Sir Aldrich Hawthorne, the Crown's former legal advisor. Dated September 12, 1997, 12 days after Diana's death. The document declared that any actions by Camilla that might undermine institutional continuity would be neutralized and sealed by royal discretion. In other words, if Camilla ever became a threat, the monarchy would bury the truth. Attached were ledgers, offshore transfers, shell accounts. One transaction, $2.4 million, wired to a now-defunct Paris security firm 2 days before Diana's crash. The firm's role? Transport reassignment. The same company that had replaced Diana's Paris escort the night she died. Buried deeper were notes from Charles's private secretary, referencing coordination with non-UK intermediaries and a phrase scribbled in the margins, legacy containment. It wasn't an order to kill. But it was a blueprint for silence. William sealed the files again. He didn't tell Charles. Not yet. Someone else did. On August 9, the Times received a leak. A copy of Protocol 97. Within 6 hours, it was global. Headlines didn't whisper, they detonated, Charles knew. Cover-up confirmed. Diana's death protected for the crown. By morning, thousands gathered outside Kensington in Buckingham. Not with torches, but with printouts of Camilla's words, "Are you sure the escort can wait?" For the monarchy, it wasn't just shame, it was collapse. Inside Windsor, Charles was summoned by the Royal Advisory Council. No cameras. No aides. No Camilla. Just silence. According to a leak, his only words were, "I loved her enough to protect her. Even when I feared the worst." Those words were published worldwide before sunset. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend her. He confirmed everything. The man who had waited a lifetime to marry Camilla had watched her fall and let it happen. On the Isle of Skye, Camilla received her weekly digest 2 days later. The headlines were redacted. The quotes blacked out. But she didn't need to read them. She could feel it. Her name, her blood, her breath had become a curse to the crown. And while she stared out across the cliffs in silence, another woman stepped into history. Catherine. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't stage a moment. She simply walked into the royal vault beneath Kensington Palace on August 18, holding a white envelope. It was addressed to Charlotte. The seal bore Diana's crest. Inside were Diana's personal belongings, her letters, her diaries, her sapphire engagement ring, and the truth she was never allowed to speak. Catherine legally transferred it all into the permanent custody of the Wales bloodline. Not the monarchy. Not the institution. Her daughter. No cameras captured the moment. But the story leaked. By August 20, over 400,000 citizens signed a public declaration thanking Catherine for restoring Diana's legacy. Even critics of the monarchy called it the first honest act in decades. It wasn't about sentiment. It was about justice. And justice was not finished. Inside the palace, a new entity was forming, the Wales Legacy Trust. Catherine led its creation in silence. Its mission, preserve Diana's personal archives, host public exhibitions, and fund education for women silenced by power. Lady Rachel Montford, Diana's former archivist and Charlotte's godmother, was named director. Its oversight? Independent. Its funding? Voluntary. Its soul? Diana's. Camilla was still alive, breathing in stone and regret. But she no longer existed in the narrative. Her portrait had been removed. Her titles erased. Her family shunned. Her name nothing more than a whisper of betrayal. She didn't just lose her crown. She lost the war. And somewhere in the winds of the Highlands, as a letter from Charlotte reached her gloved hands, Camilla read the final line from her granddaughter's writing, words Catherine had allowed to be sent. "I know what you did." Camilla read the letter again. The handwriting was small and careful, clearly a child's, but the final words cut through her like glass. "I know what you did." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. It was from Charlotte. Sent under Catherine's seal. Approved by William. Delivered through the Crown's own internal courier system. Every step had been deliberate. Every message, unmistakable. Camilla dropped the letter. Her hands shook, not from guilt, but from fear. Fear that this time, finally, there would be no more escaping. The world had moved on, and she wasn't part of it. She hadn't just been exiled. She had been erased. Forgotten by the family she tried to claim, and hunted by the memory she had tried to bury. But outside, beyond the cliffs and the barbed wire, history was still being rewritten. On August 26, 2025, the Wales Legacy Trust opened its first public exhibit. Not in a palace or royal hall, but in a public library in Manchester. The exhibit's title was simple: The Woman They Tried to Erase. Inside were Diana's handwritten letters, audio diaries, scanned personal photos, and one document that brought the crowd to silence, her final note, retrieved from the sealed envelope Catherine had delivered to Charlotte. The letter was displayed in a glass case, with one line highlighted in red ink: "They are planning something. Please believe me." Visitors wept. Volunteers handed out tissues. Journalists described the atmosphere as one of reverence, rage, and collective release. By the end of the first week, over 78,000 people had attended. The line outside stretched for 5 blocks. And for the first time in decades, the public wasn't mourning a tragedy, they were standing in solidarity with the truth. Inside Parliament, the debate turned urgent. Some MPs demanded a formal revision of Diana's official death record. Others called for Camilla to be stripped of every remaining royal association, including burial rights on royal grounds. On September 1, an emergency vote passed: Camilla Parker Bowles would not be buried in royal soil. She would never lie beside Charles. Her resting place, when that day came, would be chosen by the state. Not the monarchy. Not the crown. Charles did not protest. He simply lowered his head and whispered, "I understand." Those 3 words were all he said for weeks. At Balmoral, he was seen wandering the moors alone. He cancelled all public appearances. He stopped speaking to staff. One aide described him as looking 20 years older. Another said he looked like a man who had finally seen a ghost. Because he had. He saw her in Charlotte's eyes. In Catherine's quiet steps. In William's silence. Diana wasn't gone. She was everywhere. She was rising. And back on the Isle of Skye, Camilla's estate grew even quieter. Her staff was reduced to 3. Her meals shrank. Her requests were denied. When she asked for updated books, the request was ignored. When she asked for a mirror, it was removed. When she petitioned to see Charles, she received a single reply from the royal secretary: request denied. She wasn't just exiled. She was contained. Forgotten. But even in her isolation, the fire outside burned hotter. On September 7, 2025, a second leak surfaced, this time from within Clarence House. It was a transcript. A secret recording dated 1999. 3 voices: Camilla, Charles, Hawthorne. The discussion was quiet, clinical, and damning. They talked about public memory. About Diana's growing mythos. About the risk of uncontrolled sympathy. They used phrases like narrative drift and containment strategy. And then, the moment that made the nation's blood run cold. Camilla, laughing. Charles, silent. Hawthorne, instructing. And then Camilla said it. The people forget if we smile long enough. But the people hadn't forgotten. And they weren't smiling anymore. Public fury reignited like wildfire. Hashtags dominated every platform: hashtag never forget Diana, hashtag Camilla knew, hashtag the crown lied. Protesters flooded the gates of Buckingham and Windsor with signs reading "Justice delayed is justice denied" and "No more Queens of Silence." On September 10, Catherine broke her silence. A single statement, posted to the official Wales Trust page: "Some truths arrive late. But they arrive. This one belongs to my daughter and to all those who waited in silence. The Wales family will protect it. Always." That one paragraph was shared more than 40 million times in 2 days. The public response was immediate. The backlash against the old guard became a reckoning. Inside Buckingham Palace, no one said Camilla's name anymore. Not even Charles. She was referred to only as the subject. Her former office was converted into storage. Her name was erased from archives, charities, and public records. Even her coat of arms was quietly removed from display. At the Wales Legacy Trust headquarters, a new wall was unveiled. It bore the full text of Diana's final letter, etched in stone. Charlotte, now 11, placed a white rose beneath it during the opening. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The world watched in awe as a child stepped where her grandmother once stood. Camilla watched the ceremony through a grainy, muted television feed allowed only 5 minutes of view time. Not out of duty. Out of pity. She turned away halfway through. Not from grief. But from rage. Because she understood now. She hadn't just lost her crown. She had lost her legacy. On September 14, 2025, the final blow landed. The Crown released an official notice: all royal records bearing Camilla's name were to be sealed in the Royal Archive of Disgrace, a vault used only 4 times in the history of the monarchy. She became the 5th. The next morning, an envelope was found at the gates of Balmoral. There was no sender. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten on ivory paper, for Diana. The final word. No one claimed responsibility. Some whispered it was Catherine. Others believed it was Charlotte. A few, more quietly, said it may have been Charles himself. But it didn't matter. The monarchy had heard it. The nation had witnessed it. Diana had never truly been silenced. She had waited. Endured. And when the time came, she spoke louder than the crown itself. Camilla faded. She wasn't dead. But she no longer existed. Her face was gone. Her voice erased. Her story rewritten, not in her favor. And as the sun dipped below Kensington's garden walls, Charlotte stood with her mother, staring into the golden sky. No crown. No robes. No speeches. Just dignity. And through her, through this child born not of royalty, but of truth, the monarchy began again. Not as a throne. But as a reckoning. Like and subscribe for more updates.